Have you ever wanted to use a button to trigger a flow, but you couldn't use a Power App, but you still want a button? Right? So maybe you need to embed a button into the body of an email or onto a web page, maybe into a SharePoint site, somewhere like that. You need a button that would trigger a cloud flow for you to go and do something. Well, I had that exact business problem this week. So what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna walk you through this video and we're gonna build a very simplified version of this, of having a web page where we're going to take an input, someone's email address. We're going to let them press a button on that web page. So all HTML, no JavaScript, weirdly enough. And then we're going to send that over to Flow. It's going to trigger the Flow. Flow is going to extract their email address and then send them an email. Sound like fun? I thought so. So let's just switch over to my desktop and take a look. All right, I want to start by showing you where I ended, right? And so the idea here is that part of being a subscriber over at training.powerapps901.com, most of the subscription include office hours. It's a monthly session. We get to come join me and a couple of our Power Apps people, and we talk about Power Apps. One of the struggles we have is that we send that invitation out to hundreds, thousands of people, I don't know, a lot, but we don't want to spam them all with meeting invites, but some of the ones that want to go want meeting invites. But I don't like those little ICS calendar things. They confuse me. They never work the way you want. So what I wanted to do was go here and say, hey, just go over to our training site. So that's where we're at right here. Put in your email address and then click this AM or PM button and let's add that to your calendar for you. So I knew that my training platform, this is a tool called Thinkific. So I knew that they let us do HTML. I'm like, hey, I can create an HTML form. And so you can see I did that. I also want to be able to include those links in emails. So I needed to build something like this, right? Like we use MailChimp. We send a much more fancy email than this, but you can kind of see the simplified version of here. Same thing, except I don't need to ask them for their email address. If I sent them the email address, I know their email address. So I just put that into the URL automatically. So all they have to do is press AM or PM and this will trigger it. So you could use this, like if you ever thought, I want to rebuild flow approvals. I want to have links and emails, but I don't want to use the stupid flow approval process because it doesn't work very well, right? So I'm showing you how to have buttons in your email that can make things happen in Flow. Okay, so now that we've seen like what we're doing, let's take a quick look at the flow. So we're not going to rebuild this whole flow, but we're going to build a very smaller, much less complicated version of this. But I want you to see the crazy business solution. Now, if you want this whole solution, back to that whole subscribing thing, all those people that are subscribed for office hours, they can download this whole working solution as well. And I package it up as a Microsoft solution. See, it's all the little pieces of a solution, make it easy for them to deploy. I know, I'm the best. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the flow when an HTTP request is received. Now, I've used this before, but in the past, what I was able to do is I was able to send it JSON, right? And if you don't know what JSON is, doesn't matter, we're not going to use it. But I was able to send it JSON and then decode that and use it. But my HTML form, right? This critter over here and an email, there's really no way for me to send JSON because in order to send JSON from HTML, what you really need is you need to use JavaScript to kind of fix things up and send them. And this website does not support JavaScript. Boo! My Outlook email, no JavaScript. Boo! So I had to kind of reinvent the tooling. At first, I almost gave up because I was like, this is not possible. But what we're going to talk about is how to change this so that you can send it parameters in your email and then extract those. Ooh, I know. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have it triggered by this. This is a premium trigger. There's no getting around that. I'm sorry. There's no way to do this without premium. So hopefully a bunch of you didn't just close the window, but maybe those of you are still here, hit like for me, right? So that way I know that it's not so bad. We're going to trigger it with this. We're then going to do some work to get the data out of there, right? To get the query. And what turns out is that it's a hidden thing. So we're not even going to be able to do it. Like we have to just trip over it to get there. So I'm going to show you how to do that though, so you don't have to trip over it. And then at the end, what I did for our solution, we're not going to go into great detail about, but what I want to be able to do is take an existing meeting request and add people to it. The problem with it is if you take an existing meeting request and add more attendees, all the attendees get notified. So imagine you're one of the thousands of people signed up and every time a new person adds, you get an email, you're gonna get annoyed with me pretty quick. So I had to rework the process here. And what I figured out was that I could use the Graph API, that's right, to add an attendee, set hide attendees to true, response requested to false. And so then now when Chewy signed up on the page, this flow got triggered, it pulled out that he wanted PM. It went and it got the event from here. This is the actual calendar event that's already on my calendar that we want to add him to. And so it adds him by using all of this. Now we have to do a lot of complicated stuff. We're not going to teach all of this today. If you want to see a video that just talks about this crazy Outlook stuff, let me know. We're going to do a much simpler version. Okay. So that's what I actually build. So now let's build a version of this ourselves, walk through the process. So first thing we need to do is create that form for that input. So to do that, I jumped over here to W3 Schools and I'm like, hey, there's HTML forms. And I said, try it yourself. It showed me the code that generates that. I'm like, yeah, I can work with that. And so then what I did is I'm like, all right, well, I only need one input, right? So I'm going to delete this one. And if you're not super familiar with HTML, we're going to talk about how to do this better in a second. But for me, I was like, all right, that would just make that last name. And then instead of saying last name, I'm going to say email address, right? Because that's all I want from these people. And then here for the ID, I'm going to change this to email. I'm going to set the name to email as well. And then I'm going to set the value to be my email address. Doesn't matter. All right, this is the default. So we'll say run that, and that spits that over there. Okay, so that's kind of what I want. The whole reason I put a default in here is I had to do about 100 tests and it made it faster for me. Now I need to send this over to Flow, but the problem, so I'll need that URL. So that's going to go here. But I don't really know how to make this open up in a new tab. And I don't know how to make this send it as parameters or as, fancy JSON, right? So I was like, all right, what am I going to do? I guess I'll start Googling things. I think, duh, ChatGPT to the rescue, right? Went over here to ChatGPT 4 and I said something like this. Hi, ChatGPT, I've created this HTML form. Will you please update it to send the email input as a parameter and open it in a new tab? And then I pasted the code down here, all right? So we hit go and look at that. It explained to me what the changes is going to make, why I need to make them, and then it made the changes. Poof. Why would I go do any of this myself? Why didn't it start with ChatGPT? I have no idea, but I didn't. While I was editing, I realized that I left out a key part of the story. So in the video, I used ChatGPT kind of on and off. In reality, I spent hours with it yesterday working on a solution. And something that was really important that came after the fact was I realized that neither ChatGPT nor I could solve this problem, right? Like it gave me some of the answers and it'd be like, I don't know what to do now. And then I'd go figure out like what it wasn't seeing, like the weird URL encoding problem that I'll talk about later. Like there was all these little back and forth. So I went and solved the URL encoding problem and I said, hey, ChatGPT, here is the answer to this problem. Now, can you help me with this next problem? And we really did work, as Microsoft's term, co-pilot, right? Like we kind of back and forth with each other all day to solve some of the weirdness. That doesn't really shine through in this video, but it's just another one of those moments that I had afterwards. I was talking to Daniel about, ChatGPT is a big part of what we do, and it really empowers people that are willing to try stuff and don't take no for an answer. So this is just a friendly reminder that, if you're not using ChatGPT on a regular basis, you're missing out. Okay, someone copy the code. So that HTML is looking right for me. So then now I went over to my training tool and I created a new lesson. So we're going to call this one video test. I got to remember to delete this so that I can confuse students later. And then in here, it's got a little code view. And so then we paste that in and then we can go out of code view and save, right? We're not worried about learning Thinkific, but look, that made my form. And more importantly, if we do preview, I can see what a student would see. That looks right. And so then if they click on submit, this should open a new browser tab. And then look, it took me to an action page that doesn't exist. So this is broken, but look, we showed we could trigger a new page. We could pass the email address as a parameter. And so we've moved down the road quite a bit, right? Like we got to go change some stuff, but that's pretty cool. That's pretty powerful, And once again, I didn't have to really understand what was going on. ChatGPT did it for me. So then we went over here to my flow, or my solution. I said, hey, I need a new Cloudflow. It's going to be instant. And then we're just going to hit skip because I don't want to find the trigger I'm looking for in there. So we'll say skip. Okay, so in here, what you're looking for is you should do HTTP. You should see one called request. When an HTTP request is received. Now it is premium. Remember, I can't do anything about that. So trigger a flow from outside the ecosystem, you're going to be premium. And so it's going to generate the URL that we need in a moment, but not until we save the flow. So that'll be what we go plug in over there. Now, I'm going to skip over a bunch of struggles that I went through, but the way that this tool typically works is that we do a post to the URL they gave us and we'd post JSON. But what I found out after some more Googling that we're not going to do is that the Thinkific platform does not let me use JavaScript, and you really need JavaScript in order to generate JSON payloads and post them from a web page like that, right? So this was one of those first places I almost gave up. I'm like, I don't know how to use this tool other than that. Well, what I realized was that if I say show advanced options, I can change the method, right? So what is it looking to receive from a post to a get? So what this is going to do is it's going to let me, remember, we just saw that over here in our code that in order to send those parameters, it has to do a get method. So we're going to tell the flow to receive a get method. This was new. Like none of us knew that this was possible. I mean, I guess we should have, but we didn't. Okay. And we're going to ignore the JSON schema. Why? Because it doesn't do anything. So we're just not even going to put it in there. Like I went through versions of putting stuff in there, but nothing happens. So that's how we get it in. Now I want to see what it gets at. Okay. So we're going to do a compose here. And in the compose, I'm going to see what my dynamic content is. So click here. We'll hide the environment variables. And so look, it says, hey, I can give you body, headers, or path parameters. And so in my head, it's probably path parameters. I don't know. Let's try it. So we're going to put that there. And we're going to call this video test. I don't know. Okay, we're going to save this thing. When it finishes saving, it will generate us a URL, right? Because that's what we need. And now expand this out. There we go. There's our URL. Okay, so this is the URL that if we hit would trigger this flow. What we could do, right? And there's different ways to test this, but because we're now using the get method here, I can copy this URL. And like if we just go straight to test right now, manually test. So now it's going to wait on someone to get that URL before this flow continues, right? You don't even have to go use your HTML form because we're using gets now. I can just paste this into the browser. There's all the garbage. And then we'll say enter. You'll just get a blank white screen because that's the way it works. And now if we go back up here and look, our flow run failed. Okay. So once again, you could give up, but the whole reason we did the tiny little flow right now is we wanted to fail fast. We failed fast. And so look, if you read this, and some of this is garbage, but some of it, it can say the expression outputs relative path parameters. Where did we use relative path parameters, right? That was in here. Cannot be evaluated because property relative path parameters doesn't exist. Available properties are headers. Please see blah, blah, blah for usage details. So even though it suggested that as a property or a dynamic property, it doesn't work. This is where it gets really confusing. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit. We're going to do another test. Oh, we're going to manually test again because I want it to listen for that URL right now. Like I want to see what happens. And we're going to go back over here. This is the whole reason the browser was great. We're going to go to the end of this thing, and then we're going to say ampersand, right? So we're adding something to it, and we're going to say email equals shane@powerapps911.com. It's not how you spell my email address. Like that. We're going to hit enter. And it's going to load again, and I bet it's going to fail. It did, but what do we have here? Cannot be evaluated because property relative path parameters doesn't exist. And I think that's because we're not passing it JSON, but I'm not positive. I don't care either. Doesn't exist. Available properties are headers and now queries. This is interesting, right? So I'm going to copy the word queries because if we go edit, we go back to our compose. So we know that this one doesn't exist. If you hover though, it says trigger outputs relative path parameters. If we try to add dynamic content, queries does not show up, right? If we search for queries does not show up. That's okay. So basically Flow doesn't know that Flow can use queries. What we can do though, is we can go here. I'm going to click on this. It's harder to do in the new UI, but kind of select the whole thing, copy, X out, and now we're going to go to expressions and we're going to paste this in. Okay, the at and the curly bracket, those are for formatting, and the curly bracket at the end is for formatting. So that's the expression. When you add dynamic content, it put in this expression, trigger outputs, and then relative path parameters, which we know doesn't work. But you know what would work right here? Paste here, queries, right? It just told us that queries is something it has, even though it's not showing it as an option to choose in dynamic content. So we're making our own dynamic content. Did you know you could do that? I did. So now if we say save, then if we go here and we do test, we're not even going to, we could manually test again, but we know that that second one had the info in it. So we're just going to use that. So I don't have to go hit, paste the URL. I'm too lazy. So we'll say save and test down here at the bottom under my face. Hey, our flow ran successfully. And if we look in the compose, what is that? That is some JSON, right? That's what the little curly brackets, remember that means a record. So JSON record with the property of email and the person's email address. Boom. So there you go. We now know how to trigger a flow and pass it a query, right? Like that should really we should stop the video right now, right? That's the major moment, the major hurdle of this thing. Like figuring this out was the big game changer because now I realize I can just put a URL straight into the body of an email, and put it as an A tag, an anchor, whoosh, triggers it. Or in this case, we're using the form. We can trigger it. We now know how to do this. We're going to solve some more problems. We're going to learn some more stuff. But this was the aha crazy moment. Okay. Now you're thinking, but Shane, I need this data. I don't need just that. No big deal, right? We're going to copy here and then we're going to edit. We're going to say new step. And now what you want to do is you want to parse JSON, right? If you don't know what that is, who cares? Content. So where is the content coming from? It was this content right here. So we'll need that in a second, but because I have my, I copied their stuff, I want to use it first. So I'm going to say for the schema, generate from sample, you just paste in that beautifulness you just got, done, and it just makes you the schema. Then we'll go back up here. We can just copy this again, copy. We'll go in here, expression, paste that in here, boop, save. And now if you go down here, new step, so one more compose, there's compose. Now if we look under dynamic content, Parse JSON has dynamic content called email. Guess what that's going to return? You probably know, but it's going to be just the text that we want. Save and test. And now if we look in here, we just get my email. We just get my email. Woo! But Shane, what if I have more than one parameter? That's fair, because in mine, I actually ended up with 2. What we're going to do now is we're going to edit our flow. We're going to put our flow back into test mode. We're going to manually test it. So that way we can send it a new URL. We'll go back over here to our browser. Remember, so to add the first parameter, we just said ampersand email equals Shane at blah, blah, blah. And so then we'll say ampersand, because we want to add another one. And then we'll just call this another one. And we'll say that equals dog. I don't know. We'll press enter. That does the get, right? Browsers are so nice that way. We go back over here. My flow ran successfully. We've still got that. But if we look in our compose, now we've got 2 of these, right? So we need to copy that out, edit, go back to parse JSON, generate from sample. And so now our sample's got 2 things in it, say done. Now it knows that there's an email and another one. Now I have a rap song playing in my mind. Anyway, so if we go back down here to our compose and we do a dash, and then if we say dynamic content, another one is right there. So you can have as many parameters as you want. Just keep bolting them in. And so now if we do a test, just because we can, remember, fail fast. I do lots of these little pieces and test, because I don't want to solve a big problem. I want to solve a bunch of little problems. It's one of the secrets to success. And if we look in compose 2, we've got it. We got it. Woo. Right. So you just saw what took me like 4 hours yesterday morning to figure out in like, what, 10 minutes? I don't even know how long it's been. Doesn't matter. So we've solved that. Now we've got another hurdle to solve. Okay. So we know that this URL works. So we know that this is possible, right? That was the first thing we want to solve. And we know that we've got this URL. I guess we got to hit edit. We know that this is the URL that we want to add the parameters to. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this URL and we're going to jump back over here now. And we're going to see if we can make this work, right? We'll edit this. And so for the action, we're going to replace that with this. Okay, right? Because that's the URL that we actually want to have and we want to send to. Makes sense to me. Right, this is literally what I did. So we'll say save. Oh, we'll go back over here to our flow. We'll put it back into test mode. And remember, we don't have to necessarily put it in test mode to test this, but it's easier because we'll be able to capture that happening, right? Okay, it's ready. We'll back over here, over here. Did I redo this? I don't remember. Oh yeah, so we saved this. I don't know, let's hit save again. I don't remember if I did it or not. And then we're going to say preview current lesson again. So it reloads the page. We don't want to test the wrong thing. And we're going to say submit. So this opens a new browser. Now look, all of a sudden it yells at me and it's like, hey, message, blah, blah, blah is required. So the API version query parameter, wait, we're working with query parameters, is required for all requests, but it's not up here. If we look, this is invoke question email. So what I did was I copied this. This is a URL that my form is generating. We're going to throw that into Notepad. We're going to make Notepad bigger. And then we're going to go over here. And this is the whole reason that we fail fast. We know that this URL does what we want. Copy, paste. Oh, not paste, over here. Paste it in. Ooh, they are definitely different links. And so what happens is, look, the default URL that they gave us started with question mark, and then it passed the API version. It passed a trigger manual run, a signature thing that I probably should gray out. I don't know if that tells you something I don't want you to know or not. And then it had our parameters. But so after some conversation with ChatGPT, what it explained to me was that basically the submit form was ripping off, right? So even though we had all this as part of the submit form, all of that was getting cut, and the submit form was then just making its own little piece at the end here. But I need all that stuff. So what do I do? So what I ended up realizing was that I could ask ChatGPT to make those hidden fields, right? All right, so I went back over here and I'm like, hey, can you update the form to use this URL? And I gave it just the flows URL, right? So the parameters are on the end. And so then it's going to rewrite it, but it's going to change the form's action to be that. And so the only reason I did this is because I want, ChatGPT to kind of be in lockstep with me and understand what's going on. All right, so the first thing I did is I told it, hey, I'm getting this error when I click submit, just to see, I give it a sad face too, right? And so I'm going to tell it what happens. And then there you go. It's going to tell me that, it's overwriting it. It explained what I just explained to you, that was happening. Unfortunately, at first I didn't know it, so it had to explain it to me, but it's explaining it to me. So now I'm gonna say, will you please make the default parameters hidden fields on the form so I can pass them in? So if we do this, so look, the URL is now not that big crazy thing. It stops at the invoke, and then there are hidden fields for all these. So that way it'll bolt together and make the URL for me. I don't know, worth a shot. So I'm gonna copy this. We'll go back over here. We are going to edit this, Control A, delete, paste that in. And then we will close it and we'll put HTML forms 2 just so we know it's updating. We'll say save and then say preview current lesson, HTML form 2, and we'll say submit. It did not error. So now if we go look at our flow, your flow ran successfully. That seems kind of interesting. And if we look down here in compose 2, there is my email address as expected because we didn't send that another one parameter, right? Boom, that got us what we wanted. Now, if we wanted to send another one, what we might do is go over here. And so if we go and say, hey, on that submit button, right, we're going to add a name. We're going to set that equal to another one. And then in the example I used in the class, I set the value here to AM. Okay, so if we now close this and save it, preview it again. So there's an AM button. And now if we press that, right, we get the blank screen. And if we go back over here, 4 seconds ago, that seems right. We'll click on that. Our flow was successful. And more importantly, down here at the bottom, Shane-AM. Boom. So there you go. You have now triggered a flow. You can have multiple pieces of there. If you want to have multiple buttons, you would literally just go here, copy this line for the AM, and then paste, and then change this one's value to be PM. And you can guess it's going to pass the parameter of PM. Right? We won't even bother doing that. We know that works. Okay. So that is how you now have 2 buttons with AM, PM. You could then ask ChatGPT to help you make them more colorful. Like I said, make them complementary colors, do that type of stuff. The other thing I did I guess we could show real quick, is we know that this is that URL, right? That's the one that does exactly what we want, right? So if you wanted to put this into an email like we talked about before, what I did over here is I went and asked ChatGPT. I was like, hey, please make a HTML button that I can use in an Outlook email to trigger this link. And I gave it the link, right? That's the full one that's all done with the parameters already on there. And if we do this, look at that, it spit out a bunch of stuff. And if we see, there's our URL And then look, there's your target. It did all the styling, it's inline styling. And then bingo, bango, there's the click me. So all of that's there. And so that's how it spit it out this time. I will tell you, like when I did this, if we go back up here, so here's the one that I showed you guys in the opening demo. It did them as styles at the top. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, basically what it figured out was that, you needed these anchor references or anchor links that were pointed to the URLs. And then you wanted to have them styled as buttons. And so all of this code, right? ChatGPT wrote it all. If we want to see the one that they just gave us, let's just throw it in here. So we'll go down here. We'll do this. Oh, I just realized I didn't paste in the right stuff. Let's try this again. Delete. Oh, let's hit enter a couple times. So right here, let's make sure I paste the right thing before I do a test, huh? Back over here. All right, copy code. Thank you. That will probably work a lot better. So now if we paste this in, okay, there it is. Now if we say test and then run the test, and there you go. You can see, right, these are the two buttons that it generated the first time when I did it yesterday. These are the button that it just generated now. So you can work with a designer, you can work with ChatGPT, whatever your HTML skills are to massage the button. But this click me button would now trigger the flow that we just built without the user having to do any inputs, because my idea was if I'm sending an email, I'm just going to dynamically update the URL with the text that is their email address, because I already have their email address, but I'm sending it to them. So that was my 2 cents. Now, in the bigger flow, like I said, we're not going to get into this, but now that we've kind of gotten to this point, we've got the email address extracted, and I knew I passed a time parameter for AM or PM. And basically, if it was AM, I got the AM event and then did some parsing of the data. And then I sent the request to the AM event. And then if it was a PM event, same exact logic, just getting a different event here. I probably could, with a little effort, could have even made it so I didn't have this in a switch statements, but at this point I was physically, emotionally, mentally exhausted. This was the first idea I had to do this. And if you want to see a deeper dive into sending these, let me know. I could make a video. I just don't think anyone will watch a video that's just about that, so that's why I didn't do it. All right, so what do you think? Did you like it? Did you hit the like button? I hope you did. But if you got questions, comments, any of that stuff, leave them below. I always appreciate the feedback, the interest. What are you guys using this for? Like, this is opening a bunch of doors for us. As you saw, like, we are literally using that for emails that we are sending to a gazillion different people a day, or not a day, a month, whatever. So like, this is solving real business problems for me by being able to trigger it. And I think that's a big deal. If you're interested in any of the training, I've got some live training classes coming up. I've got the on-demand training stuff. I got the office hours are next Wednesday. Come join those. Right? You just have to sign up at training.powerapps911.com. Or if you just want us to build this, we can build these type of solutions for you over at www.powerapps911.com. We have, help you options. We have mentoring options, full-on consulting. And I guess with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day.